His jersey is the best jersey that should be at PBA. That's not at PBA.
You are Locked On Huskers, your daily podcast on the Nebraska Cornhuskers, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hey, gang, what's happening with your DP here? Derek Pearson, 93.7 The Ticket, Lincoln, America, home of the Fighting Huskers, University of Nebraska, Lincoln. And thank you for making Locked On Huskers your first watch, listen each and every single day. Greatly appreciate it. And the folks from Locked On Network for making this thing happen. We want to thank the folks from FanDuel Sportsbook, America's #1 sportsbook. FanDuel.com/LockedOn for all sorts of details and perks that go along with this thing. It's the NBA. We're headed towards the NBA playoffs. We're sitting smack dab into March Madness. Lots going on in sports, and however you enjoy it, jump on FanDuel.com. Get your work in. In the tease, in this segment, this episode is about this. One of the great Nebraska athletes ever. He's a Hall of Famer. But in my mind, when I walk into PBA, when I walk into Pinnacle Bank Arena and you see this collage and collection of jerseys, there's one that's missing. It's missing. And I think it needs to be said. So let's bring him in. Let's bring in the Husker Hall of Famer. Strick, Erick Strickland, what's happening with you?
Man, DP, you surprised me with this one. This is one of the ones I didn't expect to hear, but I'm glad to be here with you. Locked On Huskers is a phenomenal show and podcast, and so I'm grateful that you even allow me to grace your presence sometimes on the show.
Come on, bro. This thing is when I got here, I didn't know a lot of the connections that I had with the University of Nebraska, and then as they started to form and develop and be reminded to me that, hey, man, you know the people, and you actually know them, and in that conversation, when your name comes up, locals, folks native to this area, to this state and this area, talk about you and your career as an athlete in such glowing terms that it has to be talked about. Because if I said that your name is mentioned among the Nebraska legends like Bob Gibson and Ron Boone and Gale Sayers, and then they throw in, hey, Erick Strickland was as good as we saw, like as good as we made, what does that say for you? What does that speak to you?
Well, it's a tremendous honor because one, moving here was one that I didn't necessarily agree with when my father decided to take the job here at Offutt, and ultimately ended up becoming a lieutenant colonel and retiring. But I didn't want to. I didn't want to leave California. It was, sudden fun for me. But then getting here and getting to understand the people and the culture and the passion and the love, it grew on me and it became home for me. Home is where your adolescence is, and that's what it became for me, DP. This became home. And I just wanted to represent it and represent it well. And so in everything that I did, any place that I touched, to include the wrestling mat, like a lot of people don't know I wrestled, whether it was track, there's some records that are still there in junior high when I ran track that haven't been broken yet. And just in the humility of it, this is an honor that you're even saying this. I actually was talking to Brian Mudson on the show. He was on the block yesterday, and he was saying the same thing. He was like, Strick, I don't understand why, and I've got to make a push, and I want to do it, and I've got to make it be known. And I was just like, I just humbly speaking, it's something that's truly an honor to even be thought of in that process.
Through the course of this episode, we're going to talk hoops. We'll do that later. We'll talk March Madness. We'll do that later. I want to get your fan and athlete perspective, and big goings on here. You're couple of days from spring football practice, new coaching staff, a lot, almost entirely new roster up and down. What's the lead story for you, Strick, when it comes to spring football? What do you want to see? What's the thing that's going to happen that you pay the most attention to, or the thing that makes you lean away or into Nebraska football?
One is the quarterback situation, knowing that you don't have a true depth of insight with regards to whether or not Casey's going to be available to you. So obviously Jeff Sims is going to be one to keep an eye on. Also, what they do in the trenches, kind of what they were able to acquire. It looks like they're looking up in the Dakotas. It looks like they're looking up into those guys that have been overlooked, those North Dakota types, those South Dakota State types, those top tier guys in that element. They're great linemen there. There are a lot of draftees that come out of that department, and it looks like he's trying to go in there and grab them. So how they handle themselves in the trenches, obviously with a physical Big Ten football program that are existent there. So those things. How do you replace Trey Palmer? Who's going to be their number one as far as on the outside? Those things are going to be important. How does A.J. Allen return? So they're, what kind of running back room is going to look like. Vokalek, he was seemingly the only one there. So who's going to be able to jump into that room and fill those voids? I think they're pretty solid as far as on their cornerback positions. I think they feel pretty good about them. Maybe want to take a close look at their safeties, but I think their linebackers, what is that going to look like? The new additions on the ends and the rush ends that they were able to add. So that's kind of the sequence of it that I'm kind of watching it as we go.
When you have a new coach, and Matt Rule came in, and there's a lot of discussion. One, there's contract, duration of contract, guarantees within the contract. But that's the peripheral stuff that is a distraction. What I want to know is a former athlete from you, and a guy who's dipped his toes in the coaching game realm as well. What do you need to see or hear from Matt Rule that will give you comfort and enough respect that you will be able to endorse Matt Rule as the coach for the Huskers?
Well, just staying true to his word. I think like one of the things that I've talked about, on our show, and I think I may have mentioned before here, is there's been decade now plus of coach speak. People saying what they're going to do, what they expect, what they think, how they feel this is going to look like, what they're going to do in the Big Ten West, so forth. And so you've heard all of that stuff, but what type of action is going to be put towards it? I've seen that he's been able to secure certain types of players that are unexpected in that department. And so you got to feel pretty confident about that. But now what that culture is going to look like. So for me, it's not just coach speak. It's what you're saying, what culture you're going to develop, and what is that going to look like? Because the times when I was here, you knew what the culture was. You knew what the expectations was, and you saw it on the field. And so I don't want to just hear it. I want to be able to see it, even if they don't win 8 games or 7 or 9 games next year. But you just want to see a trajectory heading in that direction.
Strick, we'll put a pin there. When we come back, I do want to get into exactly what you just talked about. What's the standard? What is the level of expectation? Is it one more win than a year ago? Is it 6 wins? Is it 8 wins? Is it 10 wins? Is it Big Ten West? What that expectation is. And then I want to ask you about the player that you are the most curious about watching when it comes to spring practice and what they deliver. But we'll throw the break with this. Again, FanDuel.com/lockedon. It's no sweat first bet up to $1,000 on your first bet. That's bonus bets back if your first bet doesn't win. Jump on FanDuel.com/lockedon for all the perks and details. More from Locked On Huskers. Hey, gang, again, thank you for making Locked On Huskers your first watch and listen each and every single day. Greatly appreciated. Do me a favor, jump down, hit the subscribe button, hit the follow button, and the like button. Share this content. Let your Husker friends and family know this content is available to you. First watch and listen, of course, is Locked On Huskers. Your second should be Locked On College Basketball Bracket Breakdown. National analysis, insights from local experts. Locked On College Basketball Bracket Breakdown has everything you need from informed decisions with your bracket. Like if you want to get it right, they'll provide you with all the information you need. You can find the episode on for Locked On College Basketball wherever you get your podcasts, and it's available on YouTube. We're talking to Husker Hall of Famer and legend Erick Strickland, and we're talking about there are 2 things that we planted the seeds in. 1, what's the standard? And 2, what player are you looking for? We'll start with the player. What player on the Huskers roster are you most excited at seeing what they show and contribute during the spring?
Well, I've been very blessed to be in a time to witness some of the greatest tight ends that come out of Nebraska. There's one in particular that I have my mind on, and that's Johnny Mitchell. When I look at the importance of the tight end position, when I look at what Kittle is and Kelsey.
Mm-hmm.
When I look at those guys and just when I look at the Tony Gonzalez's, and when I go down and I just look at the impact that these tight ends have had, I think I want to keep my eye on Eric Gilbert. Yes, he's had some mental issues and some things, but that doesn't take away from the special gift that he has at that position. You look at Georgia in itself, you look at just Washington and just an anomaly he was, and Bowers and the success that they were for that program. I think that's always been an integral part of the success, whether it be in the run game, in the play action game. Those tight ends have been tremendous in making things happen in the middle, and I want to kind of see how he progresses.
I want to ask you your opinion on the quarterback position, Casey Thompson and the success that he had, of course, the injuries and recovery. And then Jeff Sims comes in, who, let's be clear, they're similar, but they're not the same. They're similar, but not the same.
Yeah.
So walking into a spring practice, and again, we're talking about Monday, where things, this is the first, I said in yesterday's episode, that now it's time for the Huskers and Matt Rule to show their work. It's to show your work. Show me what you've done in the offseason. Show me the change of body types, the recovery from injuries, your ability to communicate new verbiage, for all of those things. If you're Jeff Sims, in your mind, are you the starting quarterback?
I think you have to think that way. I think that you're going to get the majority of the reps. I think you have to look that it's yours to lose. I think you've got to come in and looking over your previous season, look at the things that you need to do better this year, and you got to up your student being a tremendous student of the game and learning the offense very quickly, because they're all at ground one. This is new coordinators, new everything for everybody. So there's nobody that has a leg up, terminologies and all of that stuff. So you just got to be a tremendous student. You got to really be willing to break down some film. You've got to look at the styles of the teams that you're going to play. And I would be doing extra work because you got to be looking at Iowa because they got a tremendous secondary and tremendous defense. You got to be looking at how Minnesota's going to play. What's Purdue, different things that they like to do if they haven't had coaching changes. And I would start with them. And that's how I would look at it, DP.
Strick, that's an interesting point because you've been, whether it was in college or at the pros, you've been in spaces where a new coach came in and broke down everything. As a player, what's the first thing that you have to pick up? What's the most important thing you have to pick up when a new coach comes in? Is it the verbiage? Is it the scheme itself? Is it the personality of the coach? Is it you reassessing yourself to figure out how this coach and new staff is going to see you?
One, you definitely want to get on point and have in-depth conversations with the actual coach. And you want to be able to understand so for me as a point guard, I want to be the extended arm of what the coach wanted. I want to be able to process and think the way that he's thinking. As game and situations and things happen throughout the game, I want to be totally in tune that if coach says something to me, I already thought it. Or I'd be able to recommend something that he says, oh yeah. So you want to kind of have that symbiotic relationship between one another. And then you get into scheme and you get into other things down the road.
We were talking about this. What is the standard, kind sir? What is the standard? What is the expectation? As a matter of fact, and I might want to change the way I say it, but what's the minimum? What's the minimum that should be accepted, achieved, produced? Not the standard, because the standard is one thing. Yeah. But the minimum, the thing, because that's really the standard. Your wish versus what you're actually working for. What's the standard?
Well, I to be honest, I think that it can't. With looking at the schedule, when I look at the schedule and I look what's ahead of them, I think it can't be no less than a bowl game. I mean, that's just looking at the schedule. Yes, I understand there's a lot of things, but there are things that you still had and you should be able to build off of. So yes, there's some new additions. Yes, there's some things that need to happen. But I'm looking at the schedule, and I think they should be looking at least a bowl game.
I find it all fascinating because being in a transitional program, and I don't care if it's the NBA level, NFL level, college football, Power 5, FCS, like it doesn't matter, that lives change anytime there's a change of coaching staff. There's lives change anytime there's a change of philosophy, and lives change when the verbiage, the things that are said, because those verbal standards matter as much as the implied standard.
Mm-hmm.
And then the end game, the final production, that last line that you have to cross, whenever that changes, people within the program change. And so I pay a whole lot of attention to the spring practice, the verbiage you hear the most, the things that are said the most, and the things that are done the most will tell you how to watch spring practice. Again, Monday, they go to spring practice, taking us all the way up to April 22nd. And the spring game, we'll throw the break here. We'll come back. We'll close out with the Husker Hall of Famer, Erick Strickland, right here on Locked On. Once again, thank you for making Locked On Huskers your first watch and listen each and every single day. I am appreciative of the legend, the Husker Hall of Famer, Erick Strickland, for spending time with us today. And as we break down, it's March Madness. Give us your 4 teams that you want to watch, Strick, for March Madness. Who are the 4 teams that stand out to you?
Well,
you know what, they got your attention. Well,
that's crazy because I personally don't think none of the number ones are going to go and be there. That's my thought. I'm going to throw that out there. So I don't know about any particular teams, but a team that caught my eye when I got to see them at PBA was Drake. Mm-hmm. DeVries is a tremendous coach. He's going to have them tremendously prepared. It doesn't matter if they're undersized. They're not going to be overwhelmed. They shoot the ball very well. There's a lot of good things that I like from them. A team that impressed me, even though they came up short, is Texas A&M. For me, I love great guard play, and I got to see young Wade IV when he was at Lancaster, and his progression and his growth and the way that he leads that team. That's a team that I'm kind of keeping my eye on as well. I'm real leery of the Big Ten, DP. I don't think a Big Ten team is. I don't know if they're gonna get to the Final 8. I don't think there will be one that gets there. I think Purdue has the best chance to do it, but I'm still not sold on them right now because of just the way that they played down the stretch. A team that keep an eye on as well is watch out for Marquette.
Shaka, baby.
I think Shaka's got them playing a tremendous style, and I think he's comfortable with that VCU, that Marquette, that Creighton, that type of Steve. I think Texas was too big for him. He likes to I think that's his zone. He's a Wisconsin guy. He's got them bought in, and they believe in. So watch out for him.
I think it's fascinating, right, to go through this. But people have talked about, of course, Zach Edey will be the player of the year. But who's the best player? Who's the best player in college basketball?
Man, that's tough because I've seen kids ride and be up and down. And, I mean, to be honest, maybe the kid in Alabama is the only one that I see.
Brandon Miller's legit. He does everything well. He's got the dog in him. I think he's the player that most people around the country who haven't spent a lot of time watching Alabama, they're going to find out about this guy. And I think if a draft was held, that certainly he's in the conversation, top 3. I think it'll be an interesting run. And then finally, I'll ask you just to go out on a limb here. What's the status of Fred Hoiberg here?
I think Fred's he's going to have another year. I think if he's able to build on what he's been, I think just on the fact that he was able to change a culture in 1 year. It was a losing culture. It was you didn't know what to expect. I didn't know what style they were going to play. I didn't see any growth from game to game. But from this team, I saw something that gave me a little spark and a little hint. Now, what they get, they're going to need to get in the transfer portal. They're going to need to get a couple of things in the transfer portal. I think that if they can do that, they'll help and hopefully get back healthy guys like Gary and hopefully Keita, and work on areas that are weaknesses for them to make them better. I think Keita's got bad footwork right now. I think he needs to get his footwork right. I think I might have shared this with you. I think Breidenbach needs Drew Timmy tape. I'm saying you need to watch this all summer, and when you come back to work out, this is what you need to look like. You know, that's just my perspective on it. I shared it with them and the staff too. I said he needs to look like Drew Timmy in order for y'all to have some true success.
It's Timmy time everywhere, baby. We'll do it. Hey, Strick, thank you, brother, for what you do. We want to thank the folks for making Locked On Huskers your first watch and listen each and every day. Your second watch and listen should be Locked On College Basketball. Isaac and Andy take you through. They give you some of the best coaches, brightest coaches, biggest stars, all the information you need to get yourself prepared for March Madness and this run through April. Go check it out on YouTube or however else you consume your podcast. We'll close this episode of Locked On Huskers with those three words we love so much. Go big.